people will are engaged in their communities, in faith-based groups, in schools, in sporting teams, in their family, kind of in their family networks. And these are places that are very, very important in terms of imparting and sharing information and acting upon information. So they play quite a crucial role in enabling people to become informed and aware and learn about the Canadian system and the opportunities that it might create for them. It also allowed them to build the cultural capital that is necessary for them to have access to particular resources or negotiate the particular setting, for example, pursue formal education or make the most of training settings and so on. So these everyday spaces are very rich sites that settlement sector workers probably have already familiar with, are already kind of embedded in. But I would really suggest that they could, that embeddedness, that partnership with the communities, those everyday spaces for learning are very critical. So that's the first thing. The other thing is I think that settlement workers should really think about the work they do in addition to providing timely and adequate access to information in multiple languages in the format that is appropriate, which is of course obvious, is to think a little bit more broadly and holistically about the relationship that they have with newcomers and the communities in which they are embedded. And in particular, maybe thinking about their work as also being about facilitating new kinds of knowledge. And I think what I find is newcomers really come with ideas, with skills, with expertise. They are content creators potentially, and going beyond just thinking about the work we do as informing the other, but also as involving them. And that involving dichotomy is a very, very key one, because we know that people love sharing stories. We know that people love sharing experiences. There's a cathartic aspect to it that is really, really important to the self-esteem of newcomers. People like to feel valued and like to share and to contribute their experiences, often to impart their knowledge so that others may not fall in the same traps that they were. So that is quite important. So maybe having a more holistic view of the information environment of newcomers, as was mentioned earlier. And maybe the last point would be to develop what we call a diversity mindset, which settlement workers already have. But what is meant by that is this idea that often, especially in the information professions, but we tend to see ourselves as neutral, as objective, as kind of detached a bit from the lived experiences of newcomers. And the idea here is that I think we need to build on the linguistic and cultural assets and even the social assets of settlement workers, so that they can really not necessarily blur the boundary between objective and subjective, but really just view what they bring to the relationship as something that is often unique and valued from both ends. So this is more a call for employers, I would say, to really kind of encourage settlement workers to manifest more explicitly kind of their own asset, the social, linguistic, cultural assets, and put that into work in the relationship, which I think is quite important. And again, the last bit is about social media. Going back to social media, we collectively need to do a better job at harnessing social media more effectively. I think that it's starting. I know IRCC, for example, is working on that. Costian and other agencies are working on apps for newcomers to help them. We need to be more risk takers, and I think we need to be more daring and maybe partner with educational institutions or even the private sector to really think about how do people use social media, how do newcomers use social media. and what's the life cycle of this social media? How does it change and how does it kind of transform over time? And by being plugged in into the networks and the systems that people use, I think we can probably provide them with information in a more reliable way. So being plugged into the online forums, for example, that community create is a good starting point. But perhaps changing our thinking about friending people on WhatsApp, on Facebook. Up to this point, there's kind of a line where you don't really friend individual people, but I think we need to think about whether in this day and age this line needs to remain and what it would mean to negotiate a relationship that is also virtual. So I think it's really kind of this new age of information and communication technologies really forces us to rethink about how we go about doing the work we do, and I think there are exciting opportunities ahead.